The following stories come from the book Creepy Nebraska: Ghosts, Monsters, UFOs, and Other Cornhusker Curiosities. In 1984, decades before the famous 1947 flying saucer crash in Roswell, New Mexico, there were reports of a mysterious airship crash in Dundee County, Nebraska. Modern UFO enthusiasts who take the account seriously argue that this was not an airship, since no technology existed at the time, but rather an alien spacecraft. Here is an excerpt from the Nebraska Nugget. About 35 miles northwest of Benkelman, Dundee County, on the 6th of June, a very startling phenomenon occurred. It seems that John W. Ellis and 3 of his herdsmen and a number of other cowboys were out engaged in a roundup. They were startled by a terrific whirring noise over their heads, and turning their eyes saw a blazing body falling like a shot to earth. It struck beyond them, being hidden from view by a bank. The Nebraska State Journal on June 8th reported this. A celestial visitor, a startling and curious story from the ranges of Dundee County. It is evidently a machine of human manufacture. All particulars that are yet learned. Special to the State Journal. Benkelman, June 7th. A most remarkable phenomenon occurred about 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon at a point 35 miles northwest of this place. John W. Ellis, a well-known ranchman, was going out to his herd in company with 3 of his herders and several other cowboys engaged in the annual roundup. While riding along a draw, they heard a terrific rushing, roaring sound overhead, and looking up, saw what appeared to be a blazing meteor of immense size falling at an angle to the earth. A moment later, it struck the ground out of sight over the bank. Scrambling up the steep hill, they saw the object bounding along half a mile away and disappear in another draw. Galloping toward it with all their speed, they were astounded to see several fragments of cogwheels and other pieces of machinery lying on the ground, scattered in the path made by the aerial visitor, glowing with heat so intense as to scorch the grass for a long distance around each fragment and make it impossible for one to approach it. Coming to the edge of the deep ravine into which the strange object had fallen, they undertook to see what it was. But the heat was so great that the air about it was fairly ablaze, and it emitted a light so dazzling that the eye could not rest on it for more than a moment. An idea of the heat may be gained from the fact that one of the party, a cowboy named Alf Williamson, stood with his head incautiously exposed over the bank, and in less than half a minute he fell senseless. His face was desperately blistered and his hair singed to a crisp. His condition is said to be dangerous. The distance to the aerolite, or whatever it is, was nearly 200 feet. The burned man was taken to Mr. Ellis's house, cared for as well as circumstances would allow, and a doctor sent for. His brother, who lives in Denver, has just been telegraphed for. Finding it impossible to approach the mysterious visitor, the party turned back on its trail. Where it first touched the earth, the ground was sandy and bare of grass. The sand was fused to an unknown depth over a space about 25 feet wide by 80 feet long, and the melted stuff was still bubbling and hissing. Between this and the final resting place, there were several like spots where it had come in contact with the ground, but none so well marked. Finding it impossible to do any investigating, Mr. Ellis returned to his house and sent out messengers to neighboring ranches. When night came, the light from the wonderful object beamed almost like the sun, and the visitors who went out to see it were entirely powerless to bear the glow. This morning, another visit was made to the spot. In the party was E.W. Rollins, brand inspector for this district, who came into Benkelman tonight, and from whom a full verification of particulars is obtained. The smaller portions of the scattered machinery had cooled so that they could be approached, but not handled. One piece that looked like the blade of a propeller screw of a metal of an appearance like brass, about 16 inches wide, 3 inches thick, and 3.5 feet long, was picked up by a spade. It would not weigh more than 5 pounds, but appeared as strong as compact as any known metal. A fragment of a wheel with a milled rim, apparently having had a diameter of 7 or 8 feet, was also picked up. It seemed to be of the same material and had the same remarkable lightness. The aerolite, or whatever it is, seems to be about 50 or 60 feet long, cylindrical, and about 10 or 12 feet in diameter. Great excitement exists in the vicinity, and the roundup is suspended while the cowboys wait for the wonderful find to cool off so they can examine it. Mr. Ellis is here and will take the first train to the land office with the intention of securing the land on which the strange thing lies, so that his claim to it cannot be disputed. A party left here for the scene an hour ago and will travel all night. The country in the vicinity is rather wild and rough, and the roads hardly more than trails. Will telegraph all particulars as fast as obtained. The second excerpt from the Nebraska State Journal, June 10, 1884. Benkelman, June 9, 1884. Your correspondent has just returned from the spot where the aerial visitor fell last Friday. It is gone, dissolved into the air. A tremendous rainstorm fell yesterday afternoon, beginning around 2 o'clock. As it approached, in regular blizzard style, most of those assembled to watch the mysterious visitor fled to shelter. A dozen or more, among them your correspondent, waited to see the effect of rain upon the glowing mass of material. The storm came down from the north, on its crest a sheet of flying spray and a torrent of rain. It was impossible to see more than a rod through the driving, blinding mass. It lasted for half an hour, and when it slackened so that the aero light should have been visible, it was no longer there. The draw was running 3 feet deep in water, and supposing it had floated off the strange vessel, the party crossed over at the risk of their lives. They were astounded to see that the queer object had melted, dissolved by the water like a spoonful of salt. Scarcely a vestige of it remained. Small, jelly-like pools stood there and there on the ground, but under the eyes of the observers, these grew thinner and thinner until they were but muddy water joining the rills that led to the current a few feet away. The air was filled with a faint, sweetish smell. The whole affair is bewildering to the highest degree and will no doubt forever be a mystery. Alf Williamson, the injured cowboy, left yesterday for Denver, accompanied by his brother. It is feared he will never recover his eyesight, but otherwise he does not appear to be seriously injured. The 1897 Nebraska airship. Anyone who has studied UFO phenomena in depth is likely familiar with the mysterious wave of airship sightings reported in 1896 and 1897. For those unfamiliar with this episode in American history, strange lights and cigar-shaped flying objects were observed across the United States and Canada during these 2 years. The sightings began in California, with reports spreading across the continent in the following months. First to other western states, then the Midwest, and eventually the East Coast. Nebraska, in particular, recorded more sightings than most states. Naturally, there were skeptics who dismissed the existence of these airships. At the time, more than a decade before cigar-shaped aircraft like Zeppelins were developed, the only available means of human flight involved round, hot air balloons with baskets. These balloons lacked the capability to traverse long distances, let alone the continent. Additionally, most airship accounts describe them as having powerful spotlights, which was technologically improbable at the time. Batteries capable of powering such lights did not exist. One observer noted that a spotlight with the power described would require an unwieldy 1,500-pound battery, far too heavy for any balloon to carry. Despite this, many witnesses were adamant about what they saw. They insisted they could distinguish the airships from celestial objects like Venus, which, they argued, didn't perform maneuvers such as circling cities. Newspapers often described these witnesses as respectable or sober to lend credibility to their accounts. However, there is no denying that the newspapers of the era capitalized on the airship phenomenon, often fabricating or embellishing reports to boost sales. Pranksters, usually young boys, were also caught launching small balloons or flying kites with lamps attached to them at night, adding to the confusion. Notably, the prevailing assumption among witnesses at the time was that these airships were of earthly origin, not extraterrestrial. Many speculated that there were secret inventions undergoing trial runs, possibly by a genius inventor like Thomas Edison. Yet, no airship or inventor ever came forward, and there is no evidence of such secret projects, even after many years. Today, those who believe these sightings were genuine often suggest the objects were not airships but UFOs, potentially alien spacecraft. In essence, what people might now call UFOs were referred to as airships in 1896 and 1897. Same phenomena, different interpretation. The first newspaper excerpt comes from the Omaha Daily Bee, February 2, 1897. Several Hastings people report that an airship, or something of the kind, has been sailing around in the air west of this city. It was first noticed sometime last fall when it was seen floating in the air about 500 feet above ground, and after standing nearly still for about 30 minutes, it began to circle about and then took a northerly direction for about 2 miles, after which it returned to its starting place and sank into oblivion. Since that time, it has not been seen until last Sunday evening, when it was observed standing nearly still a few miles west of Hastings, and seemingly about 800 feet in the air. At first sight, it has the appearance of an immense star, but after a closer observation, the powerful light shows by its color to be artificial. It certainly must be illuminated by powerful electric dynamos, for the light sent forth by it is wonderful. At 9:30 last Monday night, the large glaring light was seen to circle around for a few minutes and then take a northerly direction for about 3 miles. It then stood perfectly still for about 5 minutes and then descended for about 200 feet, circling as it traveled at a most remarkable speed for about 2 miles, and then slowing up it circled about for fully 15 minutes, when it began to lower and disappear as mysteriously as it had made its appearance. So far, the airship, or whatever it is, has only been seen by a dozen people, each of whom is keeping it a secret and trying to discover just what it is and where it travels from. Whatever it is, it travels with great speed and carries a most powerful light. A close watch is being kept for its reappearance, when efforts will be made to discover what it is if not an airship. This next account also comes from the Omaha Daily Bee, February 6, 1897. Airship is seen at Inavale, 30 to 40 feet long and conical in shape. Voices heard. The airship mentioned by a Hastings correspondent in Tuesday's Bee has been seen by Inavale people at different times. The first time it was thought to be an optical illusion, as it was only seen by a few persons and the night was very light. But last night being very dark, as a party of 10 or a dozen people were returning home from a prayer meeting, they suddenly saw what appeared to be a very bright light passing almost directly over their heads. As it drew closer, they could distinguish, besides the big headlight, several smaller lights which seemed to be placed at regular intervals on quite a large body. The ship was flying at a considerable height, but in about 10 minutes it returned and was again seen by nearly all of the crowd that saw it before, and this time was much lower and could be distinctly seen as well as heard in the damp night air. It seemed to be conical in shape and perhaps 30 or 40 feet in length, with a bright headlight and 6 smaller lights, 3 on a side, and seemed to have 2 sets of wings on a side, with a large fan-shaped rudder. Voices were plainly heard, and a man's laugh was easily distinguished as the ship passed over the last time. Much excitement was caused by its appearance, and a constant lookout will be kept by the people here for a reappearance. Several report sighting blue light. From The Sun, Beatrice, Nebraska, November 17, 1992. Blue streaks sighted in night sky on Sunday. The Gage County Sheriff's Department received several reports of a blue streak of light in the sky Sunday night above southern Gage County. Deputy Phil Dittbrenner, rural Beatrice, said he was driving on a gravel road a mile and a half north of Blue Springs when he saw a bright blue flash. I thought at first it was somebody spotlighting for deer, he said. I turned off my car lights, but I didn't see it anymore. It must have been right on top of me or behind me, because I couldn't see it in front of me. Dittbrenner said he knew the mysterious light wasn't from hunters when he went into Blue Springs, and a guy said he saw a blue ball streak across the sky from west to east and drop down over the east. Wymore resident Leonard Wilhelm reported to the sheriff's office at 9:50 p.m. he saw a blue band of light travel in the sky from west to east, and that whatever it was might have gone down. Another caller reported seeing the same phenomena. Reserve Deputy Ken Reed, Wymore, later reported that he saw a blue light north of Liberty go down and then what sounded like a small explosion. Reed said he was in a car with two other people who saw the mysterious light. It looked like a comet. It was a big blue light with a tail on it. It went behind trees, he said. It could have been the sound barrier when something is that far away, Reed said of the noise he heard. It could have been miles away, it's hard to tell. Sheriff Jerry DeWitt was out of town Monday and unavailable for comment. Deputy Richard Monfelt said as of late Monday morning the sheriff's office had not received any more reports and has not heard from any farmers in the area. When the calls came in Sunday night, the sheriff's office contacted the U.S. Weather Service in Lincoln. According to Dittbrenner, the Weather Service said 2 pilots had reported seeing the blue light from their aircraft. They said they thought it was space junk or a meteorite, Dittbrenner said. Dittbrenner said he wasn't sure about any further investigation into the light. It's hard to tell how far away it was, especially since people saw it in Liberty. That's a big area to go out and cover, he said. This next section comes from Quiz, Ord, Nebraska, from October 12, 1978. Close Encounters of a Weird Kind. Deanne Kearns reported a close encounter of a weird kind about 2 miles north of the river bridge early Sunday morning. Deanne said she spotted a gray, metallic, saucer-shaped object hovering 200 to 300 feet off the ground there. She described it as having observation windows or portholes and red and green flashing lights. During the 5 to 10 minutes it remained off the ground, Deanne said 2 things about 5 to 6 feet tall came out of the saucer, looked around, took some samples of shrubs and earth, etc., and then went back up inside the saucer on a beam of light. The 10th grade Ord high school student described the 2 things as being blackish-brown in color and having tentacles on their sides. Their heads were blob-like according to the Ord high school student. After 10 minutes or so, the saucer shot straight up and took off, according to the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Monty Kearns. Close Encounter at SB. Lawmen track down UFO. From the Star Herald, Scotts Bluff, Nebraska, March 8, 1980. Gering, tucked away in the yellow report sheets of the Gering Police Department, is a simple report that says Miscellaneous Service Report, Assist Other Agency. But it probably should read UFO, All Other. Officers from Gering and deputies from the Scottsbluff County Sheriff's Department had their eyes to the sky Friday night looking for an unidentified flying object. The initial sighting was made by a Gering woman living on Pacific Boulevard at 8:20 p.m. She reported that a very bright light was seen hovering over the Scottsbluff National Monument. The light then broke into two large white lights, then joined back into one light, she said. Hoping for their own close encounter, a Gering officer and deputy sheriff headed to the monument and contacted a park ranger who said he had observed a low-flying aircraft near the monument at about 7:30 p.m. A call was placed to the flight service at the county airport, and it was discovered that a small plane had left a short time earlier on a flight to Torrington, Wyoming. But the direction of flight should not have been toward the monument. Another possibility, that of a student pilot getting in some night flying and having some fun, was also considered. According to the United Press International, the evening stars this time of year are Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. The combination of one of these planets and a low-flying aircraft with its landing lights on may be the answer, but the Gering woman is probably still wondering. The following comes from the Gazette, Ashland, Nebraska, April 8, 2004. Experts land in Ashland to review UFO sightings. A recent visit by the experts in the field of unidentified flying objects to the Ashland area is renewing interest in the area's history of sightings. The experts, members of the Mutual UFO Network, visited Ashland last week to study a UFO sighting that was videotaped last winter on Ashland's east side. Their visit brought a news crew from Omaha's KETV Channel 7 and a bit more notoriety to the area. However, this is not the first time the news media has reported a UFO sighting in Ashland. UFO makes headlines in 1897. Airship seen in Ashland was the headline over 100 years ago in the Ashland Gazette. In the April 16, 1897 edition of the Ashland Gazette, it was reported that mysterious lights had appeared in the heavens over Ashland. The first sightings started the night of April 5, 1897 in Omaha, with over 100 people witnessing the appearance of the flying object. It was reported that the object was approximately 12 feet long, spherical in shape, and shiny. The object was so luminous that the brightness woke people as the light came through their bedroom windows. Several nights later, there were sightings in Sioux City, Iowa. Next, it was sighted in Chicago, Illinois, where a newsstand dealer took pictures of the object. In Ashland, however, Mrs. Cornelius and her son Eugene were fortunate to get a good view of the object, as reported in the Gazette the next week. While returning home from church Sunday evening shortly after 9 p.m., they saw what first appeared to be a cloud. It was quite small, described as about as large as the size of an ordinary room, and appeared not to be far from the ground and was hovering over the western part of town. Its flight was rapid, and it moved towards the north. Twice it flashed a brilliant light and shortly passed beyond the range of vision. The evening was perfectly clear, and what was taken for a cloud was the only object bearing any such appearance anywhere in the heavens. Professor Gibson Harris and several others at the Harris home in the western part of town witnessed a similar event, the Gazette reported. An interesting fact to ponder is that it wasn't until December 17, 1903, in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, that the Wright Flyer became the first powered, heavier-than-air machine to achieve controlled, sustained flight with a pilot aboard. That is 6 years prior to these first reported sightings of an object flying over Ashland. The Shimer sighting. Over 70 years later, on December 3, 1967, another UFO was sighted in the Ashland area. This time, a 22-year-old Ashland police officer, Herbert Shimer, revealed that he had seen something in the southern part of town. His logbook read, "Saw a flying saucer at the junction of Highways 6 and 63, believe it or not." The story reported in the December 7, 1967 issue of the Ashland Gazette said Shimer was alone in his police car driving southwest on Highway 6. He was approaching the junction where Highways 6 and 63 meet when he saw a lighted object over the slope not far from where you turn off Highway 6 onto Highway 63 to come into town. He drove on south to the loop off to the right side of the road on the shoulder that encircled a tree to see what was there. He then saw what he described as an elliptical object about 20 feet long and 14 feet thick, surrounded by lighted portholes connected by a line or a band which may have been paint and or some sort of catwalk. When the police car's lights fell upon the object, the inner cabin lights of the object began to flash, off and on. Shimer said the craft was hovering a few feet off the ground, partly on the highway and partly over the shoulder next to the ditch and the steep embankment. Shimer speculated that the glow at the bottom of the craft must have been some type of ray rather than any sort of propulsion device. The craft soon shot up to 50 feet in the air and began to emit a strange sound. Shimer compared it to the noise of Ashland's new fire truck, only weirder, he said. Then he said the craft rose straight up and disappeared. Charles Ashlin was quoted as saying, "Shimer is a fine officer, and he is a teetotaler, and he is perfectly willing to take a polygraph test." It was also reported that a U.S. Air Force investigation team was being sent to check out the report. In the February 26, 1968 issue of the Ashland Gazette, the headlines read, "Shimer talks under hypnosis. Fuzzy spacemen to visit me twice more this year." Under this headline, it was reported that Shimer was asked to meet with the unidentified flying object study team from Boulder, Colorado on February 13th. While in Boulder, Shimer was said to recall under hypnosis that a white, fuzzy, human-shaped form approached him from the UFO. He said that the white form struck him in the neck. He told investigators that the visitors were not from our solar system, but from another galaxy, although they have bases on Jupiter and Mars. He also said that he was told that the spacecraft would make 2 more visits to him sometime in 1968. The unidentified flying object study team based out of Boulder was better known as the Condon Committee. The committee of scientists set up in 1966 worked under the guidance of Dr. Edward Condon, scientific director at the University of Colorado. The University of Colorado worked under contract for the U.S. Air Force to complete a study on UFOs. The study ended in 1968 with a published report that basically said UFOs were not worth further study and of little significance. Shimer's encounter was not only reported in the Omaha World Herald, the Lincoln Journal, the Lincoln Star, and on KETV. His encounter made the front page of the National Enquirer. Shimer also signed book deals, and in investigating the story, the Gazette staff have found Shimer and his experience mentioned in numerous books and on several websites dealing with UFOs. This next newspaper clipping comes from the Gazette, Ashland, Nebraska, April 15, 2004. Analysts say November UFO sighting is authentic. Sunday, November 30th, 2003 was a beautiful 64-degree afternoon in Ashland. A young man was out on his porch enjoying the nice day when he noticed something in the sky about 12:45 p.m. He watched for a few minutes and then yelled through the door for his wife to come outside. They watched in amazement for a couple of minutes before they think to grab the camcorder. The young woman said it just looked like a black circle till it started moving. She went on to explain the object moved up and away and then down before coming closer. Just before it left, it went up and went west. After the incident, the young couple watched and re-watched the video with close friends and family. Wanting more information, the woman then went to the computer and looked up unidentified flying objects on the internet. "It was hard for me to type it," she said. I thought to myself, yeah, right. Under UFO, she found a website for reporting such incidents. After being prodded by friends and family, she filed a report on a website. The report she filed was as follows. Occurred 11/30/2003. Time 12:45. Location Ashland, Nebraska. Shape disc. Duration 3 to 5 minutes. Summary: a large dark disc-shaped object with very bright light seen in daylight. Have video proof. A couple of months later, the couple was contacted by Dr. Jack Kasher, president of the local chapter of the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON. After the initial contact, she was skeptical, so she took to the internet again, this time to check out Kasher and MUFON. The Mutual UFO Network, Inc. was founded in May of 1969 and is an international scientific organization composed of people seriously interested in studying and researching the phenomena known as unidentified flying objects. By combining their mutual talents, areas of expertise, and investigative efforts. After she checked Kasher out and decided he and his organization were legitimate, the couple granted him an interview. Kasher and some of his colleagues came to the couple's home to interview them and got a copy of the tape. When we of MUFON investigate a sighting, we try to get the truth of what really happened, using science where we can, said Kasher. We just want to find out what happened. The couple reported that the object made no noise, and they estimated it to be 30 to 50 feet in diameter. The whole incident lasted for about 5 or 6 minutes. Kasher sent the video to an internationally known photo analyst. The analyst, who Kasher describes as being somewhat skeptical, said, "This video is interesting more than you know. It is similar to another case I received in August, although this is a much closer video. Black spots that continually appear on the object seem to be unexplained." The analyst said he first tried to explain them away as some kind of camera artifact, but the trees, eaves, and other objects show no hint of such spots. Also, he said the spots are a consistent percentage of the disk diameter. If it were a camera artifact, it would be independent of the disk size. Therefore, a very unusual object, he wrote. Kasher said he has reason to believe that the Ashland sighting was not a hoax. By the way, in my experience, hoaxes are few and far between. I usually have the opposite problem. Most people are reluctant to talk about their sightings and must be encouraged to do so, said Kasher. After the sighting was reported on an Omaha television station, the couple, via Kasher, have been approached by a film producer about using the video and Kasher's expertise. Robert Caveat has been the executive producer for Fox programs such as The World's Greatest Hoaxes, Secrets Finally Revealed in 1999, UFOs, The Best Evidence Ever Caught on Tape in 1997, and Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction in 1995. The couple have released the video to Caveat, but declined to be interviewed by the television producer for any upcoming programs. Lexington has close encounter? Dawson County Herald, Lexington, Nebraska, September 14, 1981. Is Lexington being scouted by visitors from outer space, or do the lights spotted several times this week in the southwestern sky have a perfectly reasonable explanation? That is the question being asked by several Lexington area residents and members of local law enforcement. The first report of anything odd appearing in the sky was turned into the Lexington Police Department about 9 p.m. Tuesday night. But since that report and a subsequent report Wednesday, other people have come forward with sightings that occurred Monday night. According to Officer Gene Brummett of the Lexington Police Department, the first report came from a resident in southwest Lexington who reported seeing 2 brilliant lights hovering in the sky. Upon further observation, one of the lights went out, turning into a multicolored object that proceeded slowly across the sky to the east. The other object remained in the sky over Lexington until the officers arrived. I thought he was crazy, but then I saw it too, Sergeant Hubert Pierce said. But his opportunity to observe the phenomenon was limited because shortly after the officers arrived, it started moving across the sky toward the southwest. The officers followed the light westward out of town, observing a reddish glow from the object. The officers continued to track the object across the sky until they reached the Dar Bridge Road. The object disappeared over the southwest horizon shortly after. Contact with other law enforcement agencies in Gosper, Frontier, and Lincoln counties failed to produce any other sightings Tuesday, and reports from air controllers in Grand Island and Denver listed no aircraft in this area at the time. Among others reporting a possible sighting was Lexington Twin Weekly's publisher, Jim Kelly. Upon hearing the first report of the UFO sighting, Kelly reported seeing a bright star in the western skies a few minutes earlier in the night. However, after a brief look to confirm his suspicions, he returned only to say it's not there anymore. While Tuesday night's plea for a confirmation drew no responses, Wednesday night brought another sighting. About 8:30 p.m., a Gosper County deputy sheriff notified the Lexington Police Department with a short message. It's back. From it, and Officer Steve Finke took an observation post on West Walnut at the city limits. It's definitely something besides a star, Finke said. At first it appeared to be getting closer and closer, but the longer we looked, the smaller it got. It might be a satellite, he speculated. I don't think it's an airplane, but it could be a helicopter. Finke described the object as a white light with a shadow around it, and he said he planned to take binoculars with him on patrol Thursday night to get a closer look, because the officer's curiosity is demanding an explanation. We want to find out what this thing is, at least for our own satisfaction, he said. The officers again reported seeing the object Thursday night, but they were unable to get a close enough look to determine what it is. Mysterious sound heard in the night. From the Telegram in Columbus, Nebraska, November 10, 1978. 7 Columbus youths heard something strange in the night Tuesday. It wasn't a bump. It was a shmumph in the night. Hugh Riley, 12, son of Mr. and Mrs. Dan Riley, and 6 of his friends were returning from McDonald's after a snack when, while walking along 23rd Street across the street from Elko, the group heard and saw the strange shumph in the night, a sight that sent them dashing home in fear. According to young Riley, the group saw 3 simultaneous flashes in the cloudless sky, like lightning except perfectly straight. The light flashed across the sky, making the shumph sound and leaving 3 trails of smoke, still glowing slightly. The flashes were high in the sky, about where planes would be, said Riley's friend Mike Reeser, 13, son of Mr. and Mrs. Erwin Reeser, except they were going too fast to be an airplane. The young men speculated that the straight lights were either a UFO or a comet. Other youngsters in the group included Mike Bogus, 13, son of Mr. and Mrs. Bernard Bogus, John Liebig, 13, son of Mr. and Mrs. Ronald Liebig, John Liebentritt, 12, son of Dr. and Mrs. Arthur Liebentritt, Roger Konwinski, 12, son of Mr. and Mrs. Patrick Konwinski, and Tim Taylor, 13, son of Mr. and Mrs. Martin Taylor. Mystery lights are still puzzling. From the Evening Journal, Lincoln, Nebraska, February 16, 1985. Alliance. Authorities who investigated mysterious airborne lights near Alliance Thursday night refused to say it was a UFO, but acknowledged they could not identify the lights or their source. A citizen first saw the bright lights about 8:30 p.m. and called the police. The lights were then seen by 2 Alliance police officers who contacted other authorities and tracked the glowing object west and north of Alliance. "I honestly can't say what it is," said Jim Olson, a Box Butte County Sheriff's deputy. "It appeared to be the size of a tennis ball. Part of it was red and part of it was gold. It was extremely high and quite a ways west of here." Asked to offer his personal opinion, Olson would only say that he estimated the light to be 1 to 2 miles high and 100 to 150 miles west of Alliance. "I was moving directly toward it when I lost sight of it," Olson said. "Of course I was driving and I couldn't really watch it all the time. I honestly couldn't say when I looked up and it was no longer there." Olson said his office received several reports Friday from people who saw the light, including one from a person who said the light was spotted near Angora and that it appeared to be first a falling star, then a V-shaped object. State Patrolman Neil Miles, who is stationed in Scottsbluff, also joined the watch. "There was a bright light in the sky for 20 minutes or so," Miles said. "It didn't appear to be moving much, pretty much stationary. Then it dropped down out of the sky. It just dropped out of the sky. We went further west to see if we could get on a higher hill, and about 8 miles west of Alliance, we lost sight of it." Asked if he thought the object was a UFO, Miles replied, "No comment. I guess apparently there were quite a few people that saw it. There's probably a good chance it has something to do with the military. It was mainly just kind of a white light. It had no real shape to it. I know it wasn't a planet, and it wasn't a star," Miles said. "It may have been a helicopter." A sheriff's dispatcher said that a radar operator at the Alliance Municipal Airport said the lights were visible from the radar station but didn't show up on radar. Mystery surrounds lights that brighten rural area. Burt County Plain Dealer, Tekamah, Nebraska, October 1st, 1981. Something has been lighting up the western sky near the Richard Reislich farm south of Tekamah for the past few weeks, and so far no one has come up with a definite explanation for its existence. There have been a lot of different theories about the bright light that appeared near the farm around September 14th, but all Mrs. Reislich knows for sure is that the thing is unidentified, flying, and an object of some sort. Explanations offered by the curious who have come to view the phenomena have ranged from alien spacecraft to the planet Venus. Mrs. Reislich labeled herself as skeptical, saying that she was really not a great believer in spaceships. She is certain, though, that there really is something out there. The question is, what? When the light first was sighted, it was as big as a table, according to her husband, who thought someone might have been trespassing on their property. A search of the property produced nothing, and the light disappeared. The first 2 nights, the light appeared very close to the Reislich home, which is located on a hill, but since that time, it has been moving further away. It follows the same pattern each night, coming up about 8 p.m. and moving downward until about 9 p.m. when it disappears. To the naked eye, the light is brighter than a star and usually round. Through binoculars, the object appears to be multicolored, ranging from silver, blue, and most recently, red and orange. Many local residents have viewed the light, which also can be seen in the western sky from atop Reservoir Hill in Tekamah, Mrs. Reislich said. Among the skywatchers were 2 UFO experts from Omaha who have studied sightings across the United States. They labeled the object as some sort of ship and told the Reislichs that more of the same can be expected in 1983. A Tekamah Herman school teacher suggested that the heavenly body might be Venus, but the spaceship authorities did not agree. Whatever it is, Tekamah area stargazers aren't the only ones to have reported the sightings, according to Mrs. Reislich. After we'd seen it, there were a couple of newspaper articles about similar sightings around Hastings, she said. Prof. UFOs out there. From the Omaha World Herald, Nebraska, February 15, 2000. The latest flurry of UFO sightings has occurred in China, But in recent years, some Omahans, too, think they have seen something. One couple, prominent members of the business community, got in their car to leave home for dinner. They say they saw a saucer hovering 100 feet above their house for 3 or 4 minutes, and then it flew away. Another man and woman drove at night on a remote area of the interstate in Omaha when, they say, a flying saucer hovered over the 4 lanes of highway. The couple looked up in awe, and then it was gone. They continued driving, looked at their watches, and were shocked to see that it was an hour and a half later. They had lost 90 minutes. Under hypnotism, in the office of John C. Jack Casher, the woman described being taken into the saucer and seeing people 4 feet tall with large heads, wraparound eyes, and 4 fingers on each hand. She recounted in a hypnotic state that they told her telepathically, "You will not remember this." Casher teaches physics at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, which has honored him as a distinguished professor and with an Excellence in Teaching Award. He gave the above examples and says about 60 people in the Omaha area who believe they have been abducted by aliens hold support group meetings. Casher knows that many people dismiss UFO sightings, no matter. The question is not whether they're out there, he said last week at the Omaha Press Club. The question is, have they gotten here yet? Flaming tail. Casher, who believes they have, spoke to about 40 people at a luncheon. He showed photographic slides taken in various countries depicting saucer-like objects in the sky. Among ufologists, he said the sightings in China are a big deal. Just before the year 2000 began, numerous sightings were reported. On December 2nd in Shanghai, people spotted a shining cylinder with a flaming orange tail. Other reports that month came from 12 other cities. Some sightings since have been identified as cargo planes or surveillance balloons, but the normally conservative official news media in China have lavished attention on UFO news. Sun Shili, a retired foreign ministry official who heads the Beijing UFO Research Society, told the New York Times, "In the U.S., scholars investigating this are under pressure and have been derided. But in China, the academic discussion is quite free. So in this area, American academics are quite jealous of us." Sun says he has a gut feeling that aliens are living among us disguised as humans. Look around. Count colleagues' fingers and see if anyone comes up short. Really, haven't you always suspected the little guy in the supply room or the woman in your information technology office? Intelligent life. Casher, who speaks frequently on UFOs, brings a scientist's skepticism to his research. But the universe is so incredibly immense, he said, that it's unlikely our planet is the only one on which intelligent life has evolved. Russian military officials, he said, have reported that planes chased UFOs and even tried to shoot them down, but never could catch them. In America, Casher said, the government maintains secret files. A court case involving requests for files, he said, resulted in judges at 2 levels ruling that releasing the information would be detrimental to the national security. There is a cover-up, Casher said. Believe me. The subject is good X-Files material, and Casher always gives an interesting lecture. UFOs often are reported to show startling maneuverability unknown to Earth-based aircraft. Casher explains that by saying their science is simply far ahead of ours. If they're that good, and if they're really out there, are we in danger of attack? On that point, Casher said he's an optimist. If they wanted to take over the Earth, he said, they would have done it by this time. It hovered. It had windows. 2 Omahans described flying object. From the Omaha Evening World Herald, Nebraska, Wednesday, January 18, 1967. What did Judy Bradley and Robert Ledeca see in the sky east of the Omaha Country Club Tuesday evening? They agree it was unlike any flying craft they had seen before. Mr. Ludecka was driving north on 16th Street. Miss Bradley was his passenger. 20-year-old Judy, a sophomore journalism student at the University of Omaha, lives with her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Carl Bradley, on Route 2 near 59th and McKinley Streets. Mr. Ludecka, 35, is employed at Goodwill Industries. He stays with the Bradleys. The two were headed home when they passed east of the club at 7:20 p.m. At State Street, they first saw lights in the sky to the northeast, over trees on a hill. Living where they do, they both said that they are familiar with airplanes day and night, using Eppley Airfield. At first glance, they believed the lights were on a plane. Then they agreed they realized the lights were on an object which did not act like a plane. After some disagreement, but with the general consensus, this is what they agreed happened. The lights were on an object moving eastward, perhaps a block or two from them. It banked and headed south, parallel to their path. The beam of a spotlight projected from the front. There was a red blinking light on the left side and a green blinking light on the bottom toward the back. 8 windows stood out clearly, illuminated by a soft yellow light from behind. They were square and in groups of 4, divided by the red light. They made out a faint blimp outline, the object being darker than the sky. A glow of city light to the east allowed them to see the faint silhouette. They believe the object was 50 to 75 feet long and 200 feet above the trees. Mr. Ludecka said he saw the dark form of the underside of the object as distinguished from a silhouette. They saw no wings. What made the object different from planes, they said, was its very low speed. They said it stopped momentarily and hovered. They then had the impression it was settling earthward. Their imagination captured, Mr. Ludecka turned the car around and they headed east to get on the highest hill in a housing development to the east. In the estimated minute it took to get to the highest point, with a view in all directions, they said the lights and object had disappeared. Miss Bradley believed they saw the lights for as long as 5 minutes. Mr. Ludecka disagreed, saying it may have been 3 minutes or less. The two describe what they believe they saw for World Herald artist Alan Tubac. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you liked it. Which state should I cover next for UFO sightings? Let me know in the comments below. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with everything I post. And it also really helps my channel out. Thank you again to everyone who talks with me in the comments. It really makes me so happy. If you have your own scary story or close encounter to share, you can either send it in the comments, post on my subreddit, r/ihaveaspookystory, or send it to my Gmail, pinkpossiblystories@gmail.com. As always, good night, sleep tight, and don't let the shadows bite.